Uh, Priyanka, can we start? It's 7 o'clock. I can see that lots of people are joining in. So let's, I think, give it about 5 minutes, let everybody come in, and then we'll start.
Sure, sounds wonderful.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think Priyanka has already put in a little bit. We're just going to start in the next 5 minutes. We're waiting for more people because we really had a lot of registrations for this session. So just giving everyone a chance, and we'll begin in the next 2 to 3 minutes. I think we can get going now. So a huge, massive, warm welcome to everyone, to all the people attending, to Ambassador Akbaruddin. This is our Ask Me Anything, one of those rare times that we get Ambassador Akbaruddin to come. He is, of course, the Dean of the Kautilya School of Public Policy, one of India's most respected diplomats. I think everybody knows him, but just in case you didn't, let me tell you that he was also India's former permanent representative at the UN. So he's here today to answer all your questions about Kautilya. It's, like I said, it's an Ask Me Anything session. So let me start with something a little different. We will speak about Kautilya, but let me start with something I know that Ambassador Akbaruddin is very interested in, and that's cricket. So who is your favorite? That's my Ask Me Anything question. Who's your favorite IPL team to win the tournament this year?
Manika, trust you to start off with a googly.
Yes.
I can see that you've cast a very interesting question before I could even think of cricket. But as you know, I'm, like most Indians, fascinated by cricket. So, well, actually, home is where the heart is. So I would perhaps have preferred Hyderabad, but they're not doing well. I would, because that's where I'm staying now. I would have preferred Delhi, but they're not doing well too, because for most of my life in India, I've stayed in Delhi. So I will go by what perhaps I could say or summarize as old is gold. So I would go with Mahendra Singh Dhoni's CSK, purely because his captaincy is a marvel by itself. I remember telling my students, but even before that, young diplomats, be like Mahendra Singh Dhoni, take it till the end. And there were occasions where we thought everything was lost, but we went by his philosophy of saying there is more time than what you think there is in a cricket match in T20, but also in life or in public policy. So I would go with the CSK and Mahendra Singh Dhoni.
Right. We're going to have this conversation again on the day of the finals to see how the prediction goes. But just taking off from there, you said about doing well. What kind of student do you think will do well in public policy or at the Kautilya School of Public Policy? What is it that you're looking for?
So let me start off by saying public policy is not rocket science. And so we don't need exceptionally bright, talented students because they will find their way and get things done by themselves. Einstein doesn't need honing. Any other Nobel Prize winner doesn't need some polishing. But what we are looking for is people who understand that diligence is as important as brightness, because public policy, by definition, is a area where you don't get optimal results. It's an imperfect area subject because there are so many stakeholders that to get them all in line, or as the Americans say, align your ducks, it's a difficult call. So by definition, it will be suboptimal. So what we are looking for is people who can work in situations where you won't achieve perfection. We need diligence, we need hard work, we need people who can connect the dots. Because public policy, again, is transdisciplinary. You may be exceptionally good in one subject, but if you can't connect the dots, it becomes difficult. So hardworking students, diligent students, those who can connect the dots, and those who have a desire to bring about change. Because public policy is all about changing situations. It's not about the status quo. It's about changing the status quo. So if you have any of these characteristics, you sure will make a good candidate for a student of public policy, or if you so desire, at the Kautilya School of Public Policy.
Right. And you spoke of Mahendra Singh Dhoni being gold. When I talk to a lot of people in the corporate sector or just in circles of employers, or, public policy currently, and not because we're the Kautilya School of Public Policy, but in general seems to be the new gold. It seems to be the new thing that everyone is looking at. Can you speak to us a little about why that is so?
Well, I don't know about the corporate sector, but if I can try and summarize for you why public policy is different from other areas of study, it's primarily because it traverses a wide swath of issues. Ordinarily, courses deal with one subject. So if you're doing a master's in economics, you would try and specialize in economics. You're doing a master's in sociology, you would try and specialize in sociology, in gender, in caste, in various other aspects of sociology. If you're doing in political science, like me, you would specialize in either political science in general or international relations. But if you're doing public policy, you by definition need to be multidisciplinary and able to pick up jack of all, perhaps, is what you need to be. That's number one. Number two is public policy is a problem-solving discipline. Ordinarily, academics don't need to solve problems. You can throw up a problem and that by itself is a satisfaction. But public policy is a discipline that requires finding solutions to problems. And therefore, it's different from other courses where you don't need to find solutions. You only throw up an issue and it's for the rest to find. And finally, what public policy does is it enables you, or it desires that you hone different skills. So it's not good if only you can theorize, because you have to be able to communicate that properly. So you have to know the subject, you have to know multiple subjects, you have to link those subjects, and then you may be the best at all this, but if you can't communicate, it's of no use. So public policy is a sort of a holistic product compared to other disciplines that are now available. And therefore, perhaps that's why the corporate sector, which is always looking out for nuggets, finds this as the new gold.
That's so true. Okay, so everyone, if you have questions, you can put them on the chat, the Q&A, and I will take them. We've already started getting questions in. So the first one is from Utkarsh Gaur, and he says that for someone who's not from a social science background, but a science student, he's an MBBS and has prepared for the civil services for the last 3 years. Does doing a master in public policy make sense, and what can be the opportunities? Please, if you can, speak on your honest assessment of what can be the personal outcomes, financial and career-wise, of MPP.
Right. So let's start with where you, what's your background? Public policy is not about social science. In fact, 30% of our students today are with engineering background. Based in the southern part of India, where engineering is the go-to area, a large number of our students have that background. There's one who has actually come from a science with an MBBS background. She's right now got a job in Bharat Biotech. So you may ask, what does Bharat Biotech have with public policy? Big organizations which are on the frontiers of change will always want to know what governments are doing, how other governments are reacting, how they can expand to countries where different setups are there. So they need to understand better governmental setups, governmental regulations. All that is what public policy is about. So as our systems become more complex, whether, for example, climate change is not only a art subject or an international relations issue. It clearly is about science and how science integrates with policy. Similarly, nuclear issues in international relations, they're not about international relations or power politics alone. Many times I've said this, Dr. Homi Bhabha was amongst the best diplomats that India ever had, because he understood science, he understood diplomacy also. So, if I may say, there are many avenues which are opening up simply because governance has become complex. It cannot be left only to civil servants or politicians. They require experts, and expertise is what you can bring to the table. Jobs, and I understand jobs will always be at the forefront of minds of the young. One way of looking at it is, if you develop expertise, there's a premium on expertise. You will get opportunities. But as importantly, there is I mentioned to you about Bharat Biotech, based in Hyderabad, picking up this young student who had done physiotherapy, science, MBBS, etc., and then come and done public policy, and she was straight a shoe in. In fact, one of those who interviewed her said she fits in like a glove for us. I mean, that's what it is. With Indian scientific corporations wanting to go global, especially, for example, in the pharma sector. Hyderabad is booming with the pharmaceutical industry. Also, India is seen as the pharma capital of the world. So there are opportunities, because pharmaceutical companies will always want to know whether you're going to do licensing, what sort of licensing, is it going to be compulsory licensing? Global giants will need public policy as they understand, because they want to understand countries better, they want to understand locales better, they want to understand states better, even municipalities better. Let me give you another example. Uber came to us and told us, look, we are interested in a public policy graduate. And so I asked them, so tell me, what's your interest? They then told me that every state in India has different transport regulations, and we need to understand transport better if we have to spread our wings all over India. And so we need somebody who understands regulations, explains to us, these are the nuances in this state compared to another state. Or let me take another example, Airbnb. In fact, Airbnb goes to the next level. If Uber is about states, Airbnb says cities have different regulations, municipalities have different regulations. So there you are. Opportunities are rising and coming up where you never imagined them to be. You would not think that Airbnb or Uber require public policy specialists, but they are in need of them. So if you have a science background, take it as an advantage, not as a disadvantage, because science brings a discipline, it brings a understanding and rigor, which, to be fair, social science people like me aren't in that same league. So all the best to you. You have a bright future.
Right. And because you spoke of Homi Bhabha, and I mean, obviously we all know what a great scientist he was and what all he did for our country. But because of that recent series on Sony Live, I mean, I think everybody knows him. But I was just tying up to the fact that even entertainment companies like Amazon and Netflix, even they're now looking for people with public policy formal training. So that's interesting because as our background, I mean, we are background agnostic in terms of whatever educational background you may come from. I think public policy is also job agnostic. Like you can go into so many different sectors. So again, one of the things that we do focus on in our course is international relations. And this is a question from an anonymous attendee, but he says, or she says, that upon completion of this course, as a 30-year-old UPSC aspirant, can I aspire to work for international organizations like the UN, the World Bank, or the IMF?
So international organizations lay specific importance, A, on understanding issues, but B, on values. What we teach at Kautilya is not only subject or domain knowledge, but values, because values are as important in transmission of knowledge as is information. International organizations these days are, for example, they are not gender neutral anymore. They would like women to be, they promote gender equality. So if you are a young woman, you have a greater chance than if you're a young man now to join an international organization, purely because gender is important. International organizations look for inclusivity. So they look for people with diverse backgrounds, with pluralistic understanding of societies. If you fit in there, or if you by training have developed a willingness to be inclusive, understanding, culturally sensitive, all these are traits that international organizations look to. They also look to domain knowledge. So what if you have the domain knowledge and you imbibe these other values, you can. Having said that, I would tell you that joining international organizations at the bottom of the pyramid is not the right thing to do, purely because international organizations, unlike the Indian bureaucracy, are not meritocratic in the sense of you get onto a what do you call that, escalator, and you keep moving up, because they bring in to the table other issues of, as I said, gender, but also nationality, etc. So the best way to join an international organization is like what I did. Join after you gain a certain expertise, a certain area of experience, and you can always laterally move there. Once you do that, there is no limit, because then you are at a stage where your word matters. As a young professional, international organizations are very hierarchical. It becomes difficult to move up very easily. In that, you can, of course, move up. Shashi Tharoor is a clear example. He started off as a young professional, reached the Undersecretary General level, which is amongst the highest anybody can aspire in an international organization, unless you become the Secretary General, which he missed by just a whisker.
Right. You spoke of values, and I thought maybe this is a good time for us to just pivot a little, and I'll take more questions. But we have a very strong mentorship program at Kautilya. And another thing, and I know a lot of universities do skill shops, but we also do a lot of simulations. If you could just speak a little to our audience about both these things.
Right. So let's start with simulations, which is my favorite. Simulations to me are the best form of learning because you then enact a situation and begin to understand the nuances of that situation. So we do a lot of simulations. For example, we've done several on international relations because that is something that it's like bread and butter to me. So we did simulations on, for example, the United Nations Security Council when they were addressing issues of designation of terrorists. So how do different countries approach it? We would make groups of 2 or 3 as one country. So you understand different countries, where they're coming from geographically, what is their national interest, etc., etc. It's a learning that you can't pick up in books. It's what you can only do with a practitioner who's seen it and done it before. So we do on international relations, but we do also on India. So perhaps the best way of learning actually foreign policy was we did a simulation on preparing a cabinet note for the Indian cabinet on how India's foreign policy vision should be for 2047 when we are celebrating our 100th anniversary. So we had these, our students become representatives of different ministries. And you will understand that in a bureaucratic milieu, bureaucrats or ministries fight as much as countries fight because their interests differ and they each understand who are our natural partners. So usually the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, the ministry which deals with environment, etc., which are outward looking, generally become natural allies. The ministries which are inwardly looking, like Ministry of Home, Ministry of Personnel, Ministry of Finance, they all become natural allies. So you would understand how allies work together only when you simulate. Otherwise, you'll read in books, you won't understand it. And finally, public policy is all about partnerships. And partnerships you need to understand the process of partnership. You need to learn of how to become partners. That again cannot be taught in books, and that's simulation. So that's about simulations. Now, mentorship. Our general philosophy is that young people need mentors because all of us, when we were growing up, were mentored by somebody or the other. We wouldn't have become what we are unless somebody had spent time on us in some manner. Previously, with all of us, it was only by chance. So we want to eliminate the option of chance, but make it a process. So we have these very distinguished Indians and also non-Indians who are ready to mentor our students. So generally, each takes 2 students under his or her wing and acts like a life guide. Some of them work with them. We hope several will work with them beyond their college days. But during college, there are some aunt agonies available. There are some others who are ready to give you guidance or to raise questions to you so that you understand. It's not that the mentor will answer everything. That's not what a mentor is supposed to be. A mentor is supposed to provide pathways. So they would say, even if they don't know, they would say, okay, maybe try this method. It may work. It's just to have somebody hand-holding you through life, which has become an increasingly difficult issue in our hyper-competitive world.
Right. I also wanted to quickly mention the simulations that we did for the IPS officers. And I do wish you'd tell the audience about that a little.
So we had 200 police personnel, 176 from India, but another 25 from our neighboring countries, from Sri Lanka, from Mauritius, from Nepal, from Bhutan, from Maldives, etc., who spent a day each with us. And those simulations were about communication because they realized that communication is no longer a staff duty that you can delegate to somebody. An executive needs to know how to communicate. So we had professionals like you, Manika, and others from the media world who came and advised them in the morning and then grilled them in the afternoon, asking them questions, pushing them beyond normal, the usual, on pushing the envelope in such manner that they would realize that it's only a skill. You need to practice communication. We also did what are called doorstepping. That is, catch somebody suddenly in between while they are walking across and then put a mic in front of you. Trust me, you put a mic in front of somebody, that person changes. And that's all we tell you, that you will change. Be ready for change. Practice it. It's a skill. It's not rocket science again. It's a skill that can be developed by doing this again and again. So simulation also teaches you a skill which you can develop on your own or by doing it. The policemen liked it so much that they said, next time we want to double the time. We will certainly be responding to their felt need, because communication is as important as the substance of it.
Absolutely. So right at the start of this webinar, we had spoken about what do you look for in a candidate. There is a question from Arkash, where he asks about that, what's the right profile in terms of how many internships should I do, or what should my work experience be? And I want to add that by another gentleman called Adarsh Pandey, who has said that he's sorry, he's watching it on YouTube, couldn't join on Zoom. However, he's saying he wants to do civil services. And will public policy help and sharpen my abilities, or should I just focus on civil service?
So let's start with the civil services question. Cracking the civil services exam is an art by itself. And so it's lots of hard work, etc. But believe me, if a student from Kautilya cracks that exam, he will be yards ahead of the person who cracks it otherwise, simply because they've learned what it is to be a civil servant also, in the sense that they've done the simulations, they've done the communication, they understand government and those regulations, so they get a head start. So that's what we can help you in, giving you a head start. Cracking the examination is a different kettle of fish, and that's what perhaps you need to do it yourself or with other forms of guidance. So that's my answer to the civil service. And there was an earlier question you asked. I'm sorry.
Somebody wanted to know, what do they need to get the right profile to apply for an MPP? What kind of internships do they need to do, work experience, etc.?
So again, public policy fits all. It's not a narrow pathway that you have to follow. So we have the youngest student in our public policy program is somebody who just passed her Bachelor of Arts and joined after doing 20 years of schooling and college. So at 21 or 22, she's already with us. Guess what would be the most, if I may say, experienced person who is doing the course right now? He's 47 years old, has worked for 10 years, been an entrepreneur for another 15 years, has 2 children, one is doing medicine, yet he has the zest to come and spend 2 years with us, understanding issues, learning. Also, we learn because a cohort learns by engaging with each other. So you don't need any specific experience except diligence, willing to see the dots, connect the dots, willing to be open to multidisciplinary studies, and eagerness to learn, because that's what public policy is about. It's about learning new things, pushing you out of your zones of comfort, because all of us at that age of 20 to 22 try and focus on one area, maximum 2 areas. Public policy opens you into multiple areas. So the more experience you have, certainly it becomes easier for you to do well. The less experience you have, the harder you need to work. So it's just a balance between hard work and experience, and neither is of primary consequence, but neither can be neglected also.
Right, and you spoke about how at Kautilya we really open up all our students to different experiences, make sure that they step out of their comfort zones, and part of that is our visiting faculty. I mean, they come from, we have global faculty, we have eminent national faculty from a wide variety of sectors. I think last year we had about 70 guest lecturers coming in. So if you could sort of speak to us a little bit about our visiting faculty and our guest lecturers and how that works.
So let's take economics, which most people think is the bread and butter of everything. Although I must say I'm not very knowledgeable about economics, but I think, boast some of the best minds in India who teach our students economics. So we have, starting with Dr. Subbarao, who was the former governor of the Reserve Bank of India. He comes every month, takes up a topic. Last topic he was talking was on cryptocurrencies, and can they be regulated? Should they be regulated? What are the issues in it, etc. So here's one person who's nationally acknowledged as an economic expert. He spends a lot of time with our students. But that's not all. Look at who came and taught a full course for our young students last year. Dr. Indermeet Singh Gill, who is today the chief economist of the World Bank. We have another IMF employee, Udaybir Saran, who is teaching right now public global international finance to our students. We have Dr. Ratin Roy, who heads the ODI, which is called the Overseas Development Institute. It's a think tank based in London. Dr. Ratin Roy is one of India's leading economists. He was with the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, but now is based in London. But whenever he comes to India, he spends enormous amount of time with our students. In addition, we have faculty drawn from many other areas in India. We have we have a faculty from the IIM Ahmedabad who comes across and teaches microeconomics to our students. We have very good full-fledged our own faculty, Dr. Pandey, who's available on campus, who teaches. So if you just list these economists, you won't find better. If you want international relations, if you just look at who came and taught at Kautilya last time, there's a who's who of Indian foreign policy. There was Vijay Gokhale, who is one of India's foremost experts on China, who comes and teaches the China module for our students. There is Ambassador Shyam Saran, who talks about climate change. There is Mr. Pankaj Saran, who was the Deputy National Security Advisor, who talks about national security issues. We have our own colleague who is now resident in Hyderabad, Ambassador Venkatesh Verma, who was instrumental in negotiating the nuclear accord with the US and retired as ambassador to the Russian Federation, who teaches about disarmament. We had Ambassador Kajju, who, if any of you have read memoirs, you will rarely find heads of state refer to mid-level bureaucrats, but Ambassador Kajju finds his name in Parvez Musharraf's memoirs as the person who stood up against him, and he thinks that single-handedly he derailed the process in Agra. But that's Parvez Musharraf's view. Ambassador Kajju is one of our leading experts on Pakistan. So I could name several others, but basically we have a galaxy in several areas. And I'm just taking two disciplines which I'm familiar with, but you could replicate this in many other disciplines, because the model we follow is get the best and expose our students to the best. So in addition to these, we have regular people coming in. So we had the IMF representative in India come and talk about the IMF in South Asia just last week. Next week, we're going to have the Australian High Commissioner, who was both a politician and is now a diplomat, come and talk about the differences and commonalities between politics and diplomacy. So we have a regular stream of visitors every week, one person at least, maybe two, come and add to the classroom experience with their own teaching or experience sharing of practical knowledge. So public policy is in many ways an academic discipline, but it's also a practitioner's course, because without practice, you can't understand the subject.
Right. There's a question which says that public policy is mainly considered the domain of the government and civil servants. So what is the role of private professionals in policy making and implementation? Is it merely restricted to research and lobbying? I'm just going to combine that with another question which Muskan is asking, which she says that she was very interested in she is very interested in public policy. In fact, she did it as a subject in her postgraduate course. But now that she has a corporate job, she wants to know how she can switch to public policy. You can come to Kautilya, Muskan, but I'll let Ambassador Akbaruddin take both the questions.
So, there's a saying that war is too complex a situation to be left to politicians. So, governance is too complex a enterprise to be left again to governments or to politicians. Because of the complexity of issues, you need a greater buy-in from different stakeholders. Those stakeholders are certainly corporates, but are non-governmental organizations who are doing very well. For example, there are a number of non-governmental organizations in the education sector who have knowledge, expertise, understanding of Indian education better than many government departments do have. So the traditional way of looking at public policy is that it's the domain of government. Yes, in countries like India, governments cannot be ignored. But having said that, nor can specialized institutions be ignored. There are think tanks coming up with ideas which governments later incorporate once they floated. There are, I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, how Uber, Airbnb, Bharat Biotech, Ernst & Young, all are looking for public policy professionals. None of them belongs to the government, but all seem to think that people with a rounded understanding of governance are important in every sector, purely because government cannot be ignored and government decisions impact on every sector. So you need to understand, you need to have people who understand government better and can articulate government intentions, government intents, government regulations to whichever field they are in, including their employers in the private sector.
Right. There are a couple of questions about the overlap or working of law students with public policy. So a couple of people in the audience want to know that if they've done law, does it help? And how does it work?
So let's start off by telling you that, like economics, law is integral to understanding any society. We are already seeing how all Indians are riveted to what's happening in the Supreme Court. The cases that are going to determine our social approach to very complex issues of gender, etc. and all. So let me tell you, in Kautilya, what do we have of law? So we have one of India's leading legal academics, Dr. Faizan Mustafa, who many may have seen on television. Also, he has a YouTube channel, which is very popular. Talk about public policy and law. When you study law as a legal student or a law student, you only look at law in a different perspective, but not from purely a public policy angle. Because you may soon start looking at criminal law, you may start looking at civil law, etc., etc. But public policy gives you the need to understand law as the fulcrum or the basis or foundation of public choices. So Professor Mustafa, in fact, teaches 3 courses for public policy students. So you can understand the importance we place on public law in public policy. He, of course, teaches about the Indian Constitution, and I'm certain as a student of law, you would have mastered it. But make no mistake, he will add 10 to 15% more than what you studied in your law school. We then have law choices in public policy, how they are determined by law, issues of legal concepts of a global nature. For example, you all heard that President Putin was served a warrant by the International Criminal Court. What is the International Criminal Court? How does India see this? What could be the implications for G20 in this situation? Will President Putin come to India? Will others meet him if he served a warrant? These are all very complex issues which are at the cross section of law and international relations and power dynamics today. So law is not confined to India or the Constitution of India or issues of the International Court of Justice, how they are addressing issues of migrants, of refugees. Are refugees subject to international law or not? These are all issues, again, which are at the intersection of international law and international relations. So there are a whole host of issues which you would ordinarily not study in a law course, but you need to study from a different perspective in a public policy course.
Right. So you've spoken a lot about careers and, the way companies now are looking for public policy professionals, but there are still, of course, these are young students. They want to know what their future holds for them if they come to Kautilya or if they do public policy. Could you just speak a little bit about our own students, our first batch graduating and where they've gone and how that's working out?
Right. So the largest chunk of people who've gone have gone to Paytm. It's nothing to do with law, nothing to do with any of the issues we talked. It's about finance and fintech and how companies are looking at fintech as an enabling tool. So we have Paytm come and recruit from us. It's a totally different dimension of public policy than you heard. We also have I told you about Bharat Biotech, a global Indian emerging behemoth which wants to expand internationally. They are looking for students who understand science and who are ready to who understand science and who also understand international relations. Let me give you another example. The Quality Council of India. It's an organization that audits all Indian projects. Project evaluation is an important aspect of all public policy. It's like, you may think it's auditor's job, but evaluation of a project has economic content, it has legal issues to be looked at, regulatory issues to look at, financial management looked at. So they came across, and the RBI hub, which again looks at financial inclusion, has recruited, I think, 2 students. So you have students being recruited by corporates who I mentioned, but also by the developmental sector or the non-governmental sector who are recruiting our students. There are trading companies wanting to recruit public policy students because they think that global trade is an important facet. As India globalizes, it will become more and more important to India. And so they want students who understand domestic policy and who will be teaching, who will understand trade. Let me give me another example of who is coming next week to Kautilya. So you will have the head of Apple, in India come across and talk about the PLI scheme in India and how Apple views it. We have the vice president of global trade from Reliance coming across and saying, how does Reliance look at opportunities for growth of trade in the context of India's trade policy? So you have a lot of these companies because, as you said, we are sector agnostic. It depends on the area of your interest and the area of your specialization. The world is open because expertise, we started off by saying there's a premium on good quality young people. And if you're good, let me tell you, there'll be a beeline to pick you up, whatever area you're doing.
Right. And somebody's asked that does Kautilya provide placement support? Yes, we do. We have a placement cell and we do provide placement support. There, of course, again, I think a lot of anxiety about, I think in India, education has been so traditional. If you've done perhaps humanities in school, so there were only certain places, or in your undergrad, there are only certain places you could go to if you've done science, commerce. So there are questions again saying that I have done psychology, I have done physics. Can I come to Kautilya? Can I do public policy? And I know you've answered, but I think you should just for one more.
Public policy is by its very nature very diverse. Because it touches on every aspect of life. There is no aspect of life, unfortunately, where regulations don't touch, because you are regulated in every aspect of life. And public policy is partly about understanding regulations. So if you are a physics graduate, you bring a certain expertise in science, which is required both in the government sector, but also in the private sector. There are companies who will look out for this sort of, because I told you 30% of our graduates are engineers. They've joined fintech companies, they are joining another area which I didn't tell you, but is a major area is consulting. So consultant companies look for people with niche expertise. So physics is an expertise matched with public policy. It's like a rare opportunity to find somebody with that sort of expertise. Companies or consulting agencies which are looking for example, Larsen and Toubro. Larsen and Toubro is now heavily into India's nuclear program. They would like to have somebody who understands physics, who understands nuclear issues from the scientific perspective, but also from a government perspective. What are the regulations from a perspective of environment? That is nuclear a low carbon substitute for the fossil fuels? So there are openings coming up which not many people, which was not there in our time. If you did social sciences, you would have to join perhaps the civil services or banks or something else. But today there are a plethora of opportunities. Let me tell you, a young lady who just got placed with the EV scooter versus Ather. Her only interest was EVs. She came across, when she joined us, she said, would I get a job in a EV industry? And we looked up several companies. Then she interned with Ather. Today, she's working in Delhi as Ather's representative, understanding how India is trying to regulate EVs. What are the issues relating to batteries for EVs? Will subsidies be removed? Are costs going to match what it is? So there's a whole new area. She 20 years ago, if you thought there was somebody who wanted to do public policy and EVs, you would think, hey, what's this? But today, it's not only Ather which is there, but there are other EV companies which will come up. And as electric vehicles gain traction, maybe other companies will also look for people with physics, with knowledge of vehicles and public policy expertise too. So always have two cards up your sleeve. One, a domain knowledge, and two, public policy knowledge. That's a unbeatable combination.
So from physics to psychology to international relations, if you really want to do public policy, it doesn't matter what your educational background is, you should do public policy. Okay, so we're at 7:50, as we come towards the end of this session, I just wanted to ask you to speak a little bit about our program structure, because this is something I know you've worked really hard at to make it different, to make it unique, to make it something that helps our students really solve real world problems, especially in the day and age that we're living today. And also a little bit about our campus infrastructure, because again, I think that's something we're very proud of and the way we've developed it. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
So let's start with the unparalleled part of our school, and that's the physical infrastructure. Frankly, I've gone all around the world, lectured in many universities globally. I can tell you that the infrastructure available in Kautilya matches. I'm not going to say is above or better, but certainly on par with infrastructure anywhere that you have. Let me give you an example. We have smart classrooms, which are normal nowadays, in the sense that the teacher can zoom into the classroom. And actually, whenever I sit into those classrooms, the teacher is a more than life-size presence, because the teacher is on, say, 4 TV screens, 2 pull-down screens, etc. The presence is actually awe-inspiring, because a single teacher in the classroom can't have that sort of a presence. But that's the technological part of the classroom. You mentioned at the beginning that we lay emphasis on communication. So we have a full-fledged TV studio, which is as good as any Indian TV studio provides facilities, where students continuously practice how to communicate, how to be interviewed, they interview each other. They have started doing podcasts. A large number of our students catch the experts who come to teach and do a podcast. Sometimes they do in different languages, sometimes they do in English, etc., because the infrastructure is available for them. In terms of the hostel, I wish I had facilities at my hostel, where although I studied in Australia, in one of the best universities, the Australian National University, this infrastructure is way above that, because just it takes away from you the mundane routine tasks that you have to do, because you need to focus on your academic excellence. So that's about the infrastructure. I won't even tell you about the gym, about the dining facilities, about the Hyderabadi biryani that you can have in our canteen. I'm not going to tell you that. You'll have to come and taste it. Or then after the biryani, get onto the treadmill and shed some calories. But that's a separate story. That's about the intellectual infrastructure. And there was one more point you said. It just slipped. The course. So the way we structure our courses, that everybody has to do certain foundational courses, because they are all coming from different areas. So if you've come from law, economics is new for you, but you still have to do economics. So our idea is to make you a jack of all before we make you master of one or two. So first, everybody has to do certain basic courses, which are economics, law, political science, international relations, because foreign policy is no longer foreign. What you thought does not impact you. Somebody may think 20 years ago, you think war in Europe does not impact me. Today, it impacts you on food, on fuel, on fertilizer. There are so many interconnectivities that without understanding foreign policy, even if you're doing development issues, you need to understand foreign policy. So everybody has to do a course on understanding transboundary connections, because certain things don't stop at the border and turn away. For example, the environment doesn't say, hey, this is between India and Pakistan, there is a fence, so I'm going to go back to India or to Pakistan. If the locusts are in Pakistan, they tend to cross over the border and come to India also. So transboundary issues are very important, hence foreign policy. So we make them study a foundational basis, and then you need to specialize in one or two areas so that you then gain an ingress to those specialty areas. So you can either do international relations, which of course I would be very happy to work with you on that, but there are many other things. There are business, business and government, governance and society, development, economics, and law, ethics, human rights, etc. So we have 5 pillars where students who are interested can specialize. You have to do 4 out of the 5 courses offered. Out of a total of 13 compulsory elective courses, you have to do 4 to specialize in one. But that's not all. As I told you, communications is key. So everybody is put through the communication rung, and we get faculty from outside who are experts in how to deal with communication. We're going to start a new course just next term called the Touchy-Feely course. This is a course which is taught in Harvard. The professor has agreed to come and teach our students. In Stanford, my apologies. In Stanford, he's coming to teach our students, and it's a course on interpersonal dynamics, which all organizations need to understand, and all employees in every organization, whether you're in corporate or in non-profit or in government, you need to understand that. So you have a choice which is unlike any other choice. We have a course on leadership taught by a faculty who teaches the same course in Harvard and in Tsinghua University in China. So you would be on par. If you take these courses, you would be on par with students anywhere in the world. And be certain, the only thing we ask is rigor. So all we ask you is get prepared for 2 years of hard work, then the world opens before you.
Right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Akbaruddin. It was a wonderful session. I have to say that even though, I mean, you and I have been we know each other for some time, and we work together, I always learn something new. I'm sure our audience has learned a lot. If any of you want to know anything more, Priyanka is there to answer any questions you may have. You can, of course, go to our website as well. So thank you very much for joining today. And we hope to see some of you at Kautilya. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Manik.
Thank you.